Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's AI Revolution panel. So excited to see you all here. Let's give it a minute so you all can settle in. So today's exciting discussion is going to be on AI accessibility and digital divide. These topics are very key to the discussion around AI ethics and at the heart of how do we ensure that our values as humanity are instilled in how we're actively shaping this technology. So let's begin. We'll have you all come in as you join us. Thank you for being here. So technology has the power to bridge or widen divides. We've seen that and we see every day. We've been witnessing how technology either improves our way of life or perpetuates existing inequities or inequalities. And AI sits right at that crossroads. And around the world, we've seen how AI is transforming how we access information, how we are educating ourselves, healthcare, and different other opportunities. But with innovation, as we all know, there comes responsibility. So, who gets to benefit from AI? That's one of the key questions we're asking, and also who gets left behind. So, today, for this exciting conversation, we have two remarkable voices who are shaping this conversation. Padma Kandi, she is the Director of Strategy and Programs at Future World Alliance, a nonprofit creating AI ethics curriculum for K through 12. And she's also the Chief of Staff for the AI Community Learning Program powered by Microsoft Teams, whose work empowers global learners across throughout the world in inclusive AI education. So thank you for being here, Padma.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. And we have Dr. Glass. Dr. Grant Glass is a senior data and applied scientist at NetApp and an adjunct faculty at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and NC State University. So he's at the intersection of both academia and industry, and he's leading initiatives in responsible AI and data ethics. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about accessibility and the digital divide. So good to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both. So to start and starting to ground our discussion firstly, we'll explore four key themes. So the first is access and empowerment. So how are we making our AI tools in education available to all? Second is digital literacy and community learning. So understanding how building skills and trust in AI across diverse populations. Third, we have responsible AI and inclusive design, so ensuring and exploring how technology reflects our ethical and human-centered values. And lastly, since we have a unique panel of academia and industry, we want to talk about how we can bring academia, industry, and society to fuse together to turn these ideas into accessible real-world impact. So let's start by asking this icebreaker question for both of you from the kind of experience you come with. What does accessibility in technology mean to you both? And why is your voice important in this discussion? So starting with Dr. Glass.
Sure. I am a humanist in training, humanist by training. So, the way that I generally approach a conversation about accessibility and AI is kind of not from a technical challenge, but, a challenge or crisis of meaning and access to like the civic and economic sphere. So in NetApp, I work with our UX and documentation teams, and working with those teams has often shown me there's a gap between ethical intent and product reality, right? And that's often bridged or widened by the quality of our design and the quality of our communication. I think in general, AI can widen gaps at scale, but it can also scale access. So, our job is really to tip the balance towards equity, and equity by design in our UX org means, if we don't treat accessibility and inclusion as core architecture and content requirements, on par with something like security or even reliability, they're always going to be bolt on. So, what you want to think about is how do we think about all our users, not just, English speaking users, right? How do we think about other languages? And, we're going to measure that impact by not just average metrics, but like for some of the most impacted groups, right? Like I think one quote I have with my team is to say, if it works in the margins, it works for everyone. And so, just really thinking about not the majority of your users, but how can we create access for some of those users that don't use the services often or use the service every day, but might not be the loudest voices that you hear from. And so it's thinking those kind of equity by design and like the North Star about having it working for everyone, even at the margins.
That's amazing. Very well put. And I think some of the themes are, having diverse voices also part of like the training data for AI. And I think that's also a benefit of accessibility that you have more people involved. So now turning to you, Padma, in your view, what does it really mean to you about accessibility in the AI era? And how can technology sort of empower the historically excluded groups from the digital world?
Yeah, that's such a nice, thoughtful question, because as Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think that perfectly captures where we are with AI today. AI is an incredible power, but one that demands thoughtful responsibility. So to me, accessibility in the AI era goes far beyond who owns the devices or who has high-speed internet. It's all about who has access to the learnings, opportunity, and agency. Okay, I truly believe AI is becoming the greatest equalizer of our time. Unlike earlier times where technologies that dependent on infrastructure or privilege, AI now rewards creativity and curiosity. We have seen today there are a lot of no-code AI tools that allow anyone to bring their ideas to life without even writing a single line of code. You just need to be a creative thinker to bring your ideas to life. And we have seen from time to time again that when technology is designed to be inclusive, it becomes a bridge rather than a barrier. So, but today, technology alone doesn't create accessibility. I feel community does. So, from the community perspective, in our community learning programs, we have seen how people learn faster and feel more empowered when they learn together. So, the peer support, shared curiosity, and collective problem solving turn AI from something intimidating into something really inclusive. And that sense of belonging is what truly bridges the digital divide. So, when I think about accessibility in the AI era, it's really about empowering those historically excluded to participate fully, not just through technology, but through community and confidence. So it means that designing systems and learning spaces that listens to diverse voices, reflect real experiences, and lowering the barriers instead of raising them.
Wow, amazing. And I think you both have really, started the conversation on a very strong note. And absolutely love the Spider-Man reference. I was thinking about that, and then you mentioned it. So
Yeah.
really nice to see both of your experiences and how we intersect at this common point. So let's go deeper into the conversation. So both of you mentioned about expanding access, then entrenching bias and inequity. So, Dr. Glass, your research brings, academia and enterprise together in responsible AI. So, how can AI systems be designed to do so without entrenching inequity, bias, and perpetuating issues that we already have as a community?
Yeah, I think there's kind of three major aspects that I try to approach this with. Is one is multimodal accessibility, second is language equity, and three is representative data. So like the first in multimodal accessibility, we know that clarity is kindness. Like so that means defaulting to plain language UI, consistent navigation, cognitive accessibility, and really reducing the cognitive load, right, is just as vital as making sure there's alt text for screen reader compatibility. We think about chat interfaces, right, on ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. It's plain text, and you can speak or be spoken to. And because it's just plain text, right, that provides a ton of accessibility, for people that speak English in different ways, people that speak different languages. And so I think, we have to look at like that kind of chatbot interface as being really, you know, accessible for a lot of people. And that's what's made, it's have such a large impact. And then, in language equity, this is where my kind of humanist training really kicks in. Uh, we need to prioritize low resource languages and dialects, not just because it's like ethical, but because language is the primary vehicle for culture and knowledge, right? If you want to reach more customers from a company perspective, you never know if one customer is going to have their entire IT infrastructure hosted by you, and so it's really trying to prioritize as many localized languages as you can, not only in your documentation, but also in your products and UIs. Um, and we do a lot of community sourced evaluation and validation in our documentation. So all of our documentation is on GitHub, and people can edit it or raise issues with it, and even with the machine translated content. And so that becomes a good thing that's you know, to your point, um, provided in the digital environment that we wouldn't necessarily have in, a paper book documentation, right? And the other thing is, just to think about representative data, right? You want to audit your training data and you want to test for coverage on disability, language, age, geography, right? And then you want to document your gaps, right? In mitigations that you do in either your model cards or your documentation. So, to think about
Mhm.
access not as a feature, but as an architectural choice of when you're building something from the ground up, accessibility and access is something that's just built in.
Absolutely. Very well said. And I think the kind of things that I hear most and what's echoing from your response is transparency. And I think that's a very key part as we build a more accessible future. I think ensuring that there's like fewer design bias areas within the code or within the architecture. I think that's going to enhance how we improve accessibility. So I think there's a lot of these subfields that we need to kind of tackle at once in order to achieve the accessibility goal.
Mhm.
Very interesting. And now I wanted to sort of pivot to more in-depth discussion about community learning. You both mentioned a lot about communities and how we as a community are developing these tools, but as a community, we also come with our individual biases, and the group has their certain bias. But a huge part about just these tools is that you can't just have these tools and not really know how to use them meaningfully. There's this lack of understanding on how to meaningfully use, and there's more need for digital literacy. So I know, Padma, you're at that exact crossroads. So what have you learned from like leading AI learning cohorts? And I know you also have one more cohort coming up, which we will like share with the group here. But what have you specifically learned from these global AI cohorts on how these communities are learning and adapting together with these new AI tools?
Yeah, a huge part of accessibility is not just having tools, but knowing how to use them meaningfully, right? So, what I've learned from leading these global AI learning cohorts is that people learn AI best when they learn together. So, community turns technology from something intimidating into something inspiring. So I have seen educators, professionals, students from more than 50 countries globally, many with no prior AI experience. They come together to explore, build, and share ideas. And what's powerful is that learning happens not through lectures, but through collaboration and storytelling. So, one thing that surprised me early was how quickly people who were new to technology adopt to AI. The way they approached it with curiosity and fewer preconceptions, while those already in tech often had to unlearn before they learn again. So it showed me that adaptability isn't just about skill level; it's about the mindset. So in our cohorts, we emphasize learning by doing, which means small hands-on peer projects, peer feedbacks, and shared reflections. And over time, you start seeing a culture of trust and creativity emerging. So people don't just learn, just gain technical skills; they gain confidence, community, and a sense of purpose of what they are doing. So for me, meaningful AI literacy doesn't come from the tools themselves. It comes from the community that makes safe learning social and shared. So when we build that kind of environment, technology naturally becomes more inclusive.
Wow, wonderful. And I really love that you mentioned the part about storytelling and that peer-to-peer sharing aspect, because I think that is one way, we reinforce that learning aspect. And I think through conversations, you're able to kind of unlock new ways you can explore even collaborations in the space. So really nice to hear about that. And towards the end of the panel, we'll definitely share the
Yeah,
poster that you're going to be leading soon. And we have a really nice audience here, especially educators who would love to, hop on that opportunity. So
definitely.
even talking about this, Dr. Glass, you have also seen kind of since you're an adjunct faculty at two universities, R1 universities, you've seen how students grapple with AI technologies. So while Padma is more catering towards professionals who are new to AI, you are catering more towards students already exposed to technology since, the longest time. So how do you think universities and educators can foster this digital literacy we mentioned and talked about, especially in these, non-technical learners and underrepresented groups?
Yeah, really great question. And I teach at Chapel Hill. I teach in an online Masters of Applied Data Science program, and it's a lot of adult learners. It's mainly in the evenings, and a lot of the adult learners didn't learn programming or statistics, and they're trying to learn these kind of new skills. And what I think there needs to be like a critical AI literacy that's put into this. Like, as a humanist, right, I believe that really digital literacy is like the new civic literacy. And not only teaching like an AI literacy, but what students tend to get focused on is how to use the tool, but not how to read the tool. So, that means like calibrating trust in your users, right? Understanding where your data comes from and how it was collected, recognizing what the structure of a hallucination looks like and why are there hallucinations in large language models, right? It's really about teaching the students to be critical readers of AI output. And once you start to learn how to program and you can do all these cool things, it's students get really hung up with using this technology instead of really going back to being like, well, how do we understand what data I'm using in this AI tool or in this machine learning tool, right? And I think the second part that I try to do as an instructor is to practice inclusive pedagogy, in the same kind of aspects of having project-based learning uh, and real community data sets. A lot of the times, I live in Durham and I bring in, data sets that we have from Durham, right, into the classroom or encourage students to grab, data from the courts of their own town. And, we work a lot with multilingual materials to see how these models perform on different languages, right? And to have, assessments in really plain language and have the students involved with making the assessments. And, when you're designing a course, having some assistive tools by default. Like as an instructor, I was always tired of saying like, go to the syllabus. And so in some of the courses I teach at NC State, I put a chatbot on the syllabus to help students answer the questions about the syllabus because sometimes it's a really long document and the university has a lot of boilerplate. And so I understand from the students it's a lot to read. And so how much easier is it if you have some sort of RAG solution with a chatbot that the students can ask questions about the assessments and the class? So, like I think everyone really deserves fluency in these tools, not just familiarity, not just knowing how to go to chat gpt and to use that, but to really have the fluency of understanding what is happening when I send a chat to chat gpt and how to be critical of its outputs, right? And especially with the images and the video getting almost too good every day. You really need to start to teach those, like how do you identify what an AI video looks like? How do you identify what a common AI output looks like? And getting students to be really critical about those outputs that they encounter in the world.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I really love that you're not just talking it about, how universities usually talk about, AI literacy is more so like about building the technical fluency of languages or understanding the different tools. But I love that you're not framing it more like a skill set, but like a mindset. It's all about like, skepticism, understanding, reflection, that curiosity. So it's really nice, and I'm sure the students you teach are very lucky to not have to go through the whole syllabus. And yeah, I think that's the core part of accessibility is how can you make that specific tool for that specific purpose more seamless? It's not about having the best tool for the best application, but how can we kind of bring that at a crossroads where it's most effective? So really nice to hear about that. And now I wanted to talk more about, responsible AI and inclusive design, going on to our third topic. So, Padma, from your perspective, how can we ensure inclusivity and accessibility that to be built into these AI systems from the start? Because a lot of times these issues come when, the whole team, engineering team builds this technology, and towards the end, it's an afterthought. Like, oh, we need to do this. Oh, this is like a checkbox, accessibility, or any other metric. But how can we have this, embedded into the processes from the start for the whole workflow?
Yeah. The AI systems reflect the value of those who build them. So if we want inclusive technology, we need inclusive teams, diverse data, and participatory design. So at Future World Alliance, we use what I call as people first, tech next approach. Means we start every design process by asking who might this leave out or whose voices aren't represented yet. So that simple shift in the mindset can change everything. So inclusivity starts long before a model is trained. It begins with who is in the room when decisions are made. So we need educators, ethicists, community leaders, and people who with lived experiences, not just engineers, to shape how AI is developed and deployed. So accessibility also means designing with flexibility, ensuring AI tools can adapt to different languages, bandwidth, and learning styles. So no one is excluded by design. So for me, building inclusive AI isn't just about ethics, it's about expanding perspectives. When we include more voices early, we build technology that's fairer, more empathetic, and ultimately more meaningful for everyone.
Yeah, I really like that proactive approach, and it's really nice to see that at Future World Alliance, you're scaling this impact by, through your experience and your personal group experiences that you've shared over the long term. You're passing that on to scale this impact over different communities that are building these. And I think that's the true mindset shift. So we need sort of in the responsible AI community. It's not sort of these check boxes that we need to meet after the model has been deployed. It's more so these things that we need to kind of have as prerequisites to building the model in the first place. Really great discussion on that. And to your point, Dr. Glass, you've also mentioned that at NetApp you work on governance and ethics. And a lot of these things that in the industry you have to operationalize inclusivity. So, how can companies do that well? And not just as a principle of operationalizing, inclusivity, but how can we have that as a measurable part of AI design and deployment? So, some thought I used to have was, for these big conferences that computer scientists and all these engineering groups are aiming for, the triple AI NeurIPS, something maybe we could start there by operationalizing ethics and inclusivity by maybe having a green metric, like sustainability metric of what was the kind of footprint of your project, or something that can get to be competitive amongst different research groups when they're publishing their work. So something like that. What do you think on the side of companies? How can we operationalize and improve inclusivity?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's many things to kind of grasp with that great question. I think the first thing is, the company I work for, uh, because we deal with a lot of storage devices that are on premises and in the cloud, we have a sustainability dashboard for customers that they can look at their power use and, what is consuming a lot of energy. And, a lot of times that will roll into protecting the environment, but it also will show the company that it protects their bottom line too, right? Like they're going to be spending less money on cloud resources if they move, some things on premises, right? Or, you have a super high performance storage device that you have, things that are people are accessing once a month. And so, we provide these kind of transparent tools to the customer so they can make those decisions themselves. But I think back to your thought on operationalizing, right? Governance usually needs teeth, to really be useful, right? And my experience when, working with documentation teams to translate complex technical specs into usable documentation, um, has taught me that, you need an operational model aligned with, like a NIST framework that product teams can actually use, right? And, making it operational so it's not just a PDF in a folder or on a SharePoint site that people can, harken back to when someone has a question about our governance policies, right? And it's really making sure that they have um, an operational model that's very usable and transparent that, everyone in the company can use and approach. rather than just referring back to it when there's a problem, right? And I think this gets into creating a culture of documentation. We need a robust documentation culture. Like that's something that, I work in a very engineering heavy company, and it's something we're always talking about, having model cards, data statements, limitations, users facing transparency, right? Like if one of the things I think is if your user can't understand the guardrails that you've put into your product, the guardrails are failing, whether or not they're operationally working or not, right? And it's a UX problem as much as an ethical one. So it's really getting your users to be able to use and understand the governance framework in their software or in their company. And then, the final thing to do is, have inclusive evaluation, right? You want a red team with impacted users. You want to run usability tests with screen readers, right? If you've ever used a screen reader on a spreadsheet, it is not fun, right? It is very confusing. And sometimes the most simple things of like, oh, we'll put this in a table so it's easy to find. And then when you run through with the screen reader, you're like, I don't know if anyone could understand what kind of information is in this table, right? And the other thing you want to think about is low bandwidth scenarios, right? Like what happens if we have a cloud-based service and someone has, like a 1 meg, connection, right? And thinking about what are those scenarios? Is it not going to time out, right? Is it going to continue even if the user's internet speed isn't optimum, right? And, if you don't end up measuring inclusion, you're always measuring to averages, and averages always hide the harm, right? And so, don't, like I think I said in the first question, like we want to look at those margins, right? Like we want to look at the full scope of all of our users, not just the median or the average, because that's going to hide a lot of potential harm, right? And if you don't test things like screen readers, right, you might think you have really clear documentation or governance, and to some of your users, it's really not usable and it's not operational.
Wow, very well put. And I think I see a lot of overlaps into what you said, Padma, as well, because it all really starts with the team. Because the team having the foresight of, having those design thinking principles set in, even to kind of manage the in-house accessibility. I think that's when you actually scale the impact with your tools that you build to kind of, have that accessibility move on to your users that you see within the team. And I really liked your point about, tracking and measuring accessibility because, what doesn't get tracked or what doesn't get measured is usually something that doesn't get done. And having key metrics to track that are just not kind of, the overarching bird's eye view, but more so detailed and, nuance, I think that will really help us in understanding on how we can scale this over time. Really insightful to see, how it's seen at the industry level, because a lot of us, as students, we don't really know how this works at industry. So that was a great insight into that. So I wanted to ask both of you, as our discussion unfolds, what ethical frameworks you think or practices can help ensure that AI serves for everyone, not just the digitally privileged. And this is our deeper conversation into digital divide that we see. We've seen a lot of, recent news about, the global South helping power the Silicon Valley, through mining and all these other different things, even for the training of the models. So when I really look at that, it's like, the kids doing these jobs for very little wages, mining for semiconductors or the chips that, companies are building that are going to power our Silicon Valley, the technological future, and all the wonderful things. But when you really think about the livelihoods of the people there, you really like question, is this only going to serve the digitally privileged or, the literate group technologically literate. So what are both of your thoughts on like the kind of frameworks or practices we can establish to ensure it serves for all? Anyone could go first.
Okay, I can.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first, Moon?
No,
Yeah, you
please.
can.
No, please do.
Okay, so this is such an important question, because AI ethics isn't just about avoiding harm, it's about ensuring benefit as well. So for me, the most effective ethical framework are those that combine three parts. That is responsibility, representation, and reflection. Responsibility means that organizations must be transparent about how AI systems are built, what data they use, and how decisions are made. As far as the representation, it means that making sure that the people designing and training AI reflect the diversity of the people it will serve. Without that, the bias seeps in, not because of the bad intent, but because of the limited perspective. And the next thing is the reflection, and it is an ongoing process of asking tough questions, which are like, who might this exclude, who is most impacted, and are we still aligned with their lives? Because if we draw from these inspiration because these are drawn from the inspiration from the frameworks like UNESCO's recommendation on ethics of AI and Microsoft represent responsible AI principles. Things like fairness, accountability, inclusivity, reliability, and transparency. But when what really makes them work is when they are not just written policies, they are lived practices embedded in our daily decisions, product design, and also what we try to educate. So ultimately, ethical AI isn't just should be a checklist, it should be a culture. When we combine human centered design with shared accountability, AI stops serving just as digital privilege and starts serving everyone fairly, empathically, and responsibly.
Wow, I love that answer. And I think that's what I see a lot of. I'm also part of a group called History Communication Institute, where we talk about, the value of humanities in this, AI world. And we talk about the impact of history and how it's shaping the future. So a lot of the things that I hear there is that, although there are these policies, there's these like fancy AI, responsible AI practices, playbooks that each company has, it's really hard to put them into practice. And at the end of the day, there's no like tangible outcome or there's no tangible, measurable impact that you're able to like capture out of that. And those policies just stay for the administrative, like, good to have things. But eventually, it's like, as you mentioned, the culture, which is important, and the daily, day-to-day practices of implementation. So very insightful. And I'd like to hear how NetApp is tackling this as well, Dr. Glass.
Yeah. I mean, great ethics research dies in PDFs. And, I kind of say that as someone that creates PDFs all the time, that writes a lot of things. We need translational playbooks. We need to turn the research into reusable patterns, evaluation suites, especially with a lot of these AI tools. And we tend to think, oh, let's just have another AI judge this AI rather than putting a human in the loop. And so having an ethics driven evaluation suite is really key. And then have dashboards that integrate directly into your developer and product workflow, right? Like it's about making ethical choice the easiest choice, right? Like if you don't make it easy for companies and people to do, right, they're not going to do it, and
Making
so
ethics accessible.
yes, exactly, that's a great point. And I think making ethics a part of your sprints, right, and not a separate escalation, having that a part of when you document your models, right, and you know recognizing inclusive wins in performance and in design, in product KPIs and community partnerships and R&D, right? Like having those across different business units, and having it embedded is the only way that it's going to get done. And so, I think, going back to your previous question, right? You want to operationalize your ethics too, and you don't want it to just have it be some, document that you put on the front page of your website or in an internal intranet site, right? You want to think about how to reuse different patterns of your ethical framework, how to evaluate how you're doing on it, and how to integrate it more directly with your workflow and your development.
Yeah, very insightful. And I think this is a perfect segue into talking about just how we can do that. So both of you, operate at this intersection of research, technology, and community. And I think community is a big part of this because you both have access, direct first-hand access to these communities that you're actively shaping. Padma, through your work, with online communities for learners and professionals in technology or non-technical groups, but also Dr. Glass, you're working with students directly. So I see that there's less incentive to actually do the extra legwork to bring ethics in or have responsible AI practices like embedded in your work. But through both of your views, how do you see as the most powerful partnerships for creating these sort of accessible AI ecosystems? So, Padma, starting with you, what are your thoughts on this?
This is such a great question because one that really captures the spirit of what it takes to build accessible AI ecosystems, right? From a community and strategy lens, I have learned that no single group can close this digital divide alone. It truly takes a network approach, which means technologies bring innovation and tools. Educators bring trust, context, and ability to make AI relatable. And policymakers create the framework and incentives that make inclusion sustainable, which and the most powerful partnerships happen when these three groups don't just work in silos but in co-creation, which means designing programs and policies with communities, not just for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so in our AI community learning programs, for example, we saw how effective it can be when the industry partners like Microsoft provide the technology platform, and the industry leaders lead the learning experience, and local community leaders shape context around regional needs. So that kind of collaboration creates not just access but ownership, where people feel they are building the future, not just trying to catch up on it, right? So the policymakers too have a key role in scaling what works by supporting public-private partnerships, funding AI literacy initiatives, and encouraging ethical standards that keep accessibility right in the front and the center. So to me, closing the digital divide isn't just about connecting people to the internet. It's about connecting institutions, disciplines, and perspectives. So when technologists, educators, and policymakers align around a shared goal of inclusion, um, I believe AI can become a tool of empowerment rather than exclusion.
Yeah, really nice to hear that. And especially, we see there's a lot of programs in the community where, they're providing access to technology. They're providing, tools, free courses and everything, but it just doesn't end there. Those are just placeholders, those are just things that are nice to have, but eventually it takes actual work of like, connecting those dots, building those communities. And it's really nice to see, efforts from you know, big leaders in the technology game, like Microsoft, taking steps towards this. And from your viewpoint, Dr. Glass, you're at the vantage point of academia and industry. How can we better connect ethical research with real world product design? a lot of us, are interested in UI, UX, and then a lot of us are into, human computer interaction, understanding the research fundamental foundation side of how we interact with technology. So how can we better connect that, and how can we build those partnerships and scale them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the many ways that we do this at NetApp is, we have groups of people that we continually learn and read research on, and have groups that we discuss papers, right? It feels very much like we're back at school a lot of the times. And I think it's not only effective, right, for keeping up with emerging technologies, but it's also really effective to like stay back and think critically about what you're doing, right? Like a lot of the times, right, business moves really fast and technology moves even faster. And there is a tendency to try to move quickly. And, I think we've seen some of this with some of the early adopters of AI, right, where we put it in situations that it misbehaves that can cause harm. And one of the things that I like about NetApp is we kind of take our time and critically look at the technology before we launch it. And a lot of that has to do with both understanding from a academic research standpoint what's happening in the space, and then also we have a very robust UX research that we do with many different users, and I think it's not just the tendency is you have your squeaky wheels, you have your super users, right, that are so good and have lots of feedback. And, the tendency is to always include them because you're going to get a lot out of it. And I think, one of the things that we've done some good work on is in being inclusive with our user groups, like really getting technologists that are younger, that don't have as much experience with our products to kind of see, well, how do they navigate? Do they have troubles? Um, and so I think, a lot of it is both like from a standpoint of, keeping ties with academic research. And, it's one of the great ways that I'm feel very fortunate that I'm able to keep these academic foot in, and it's a testament to that companies are really interested in what researchers are doing. And then likewise, when you are researching your own product by doing, UX design reviews or, usability reviews with your customers, being really intentional about who you're selecting and how you're selecting those tools. And the last thing I would say is, I think making the research kind of ongoing, right? Like we have internal groups that we're always talking about, or we're trying to publish papers together, right, or trying to write together. And so I think a lot of people have seen companies like Microsoft and Google and Anthropic creating papers, right, that are being published out, that they're being more transparent with what's happening to internally. And I think a lot of other tech companies have taken notice, and there is a good push to you know not only show the community like code, right, we're very good about sharing code and sharing um, open source resources, but also making your research open source by showing some of those papers, putting them in repositories online that other scholars and companies can take a look at.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing is more so just moving from the corporate social responsibility side of doing things for the community to being very intentional of doing it for kind of making your products and more, the tools that you're like creating and the culture you're putting out about your company more accessible, and also just more, I guess charitable with the pace of technology, because it's sometimes it just feels like we just have to keep doing something just to keep and be part of this race. But what matters more than ever is, cutting out the noise, focusing on the real things that matter and making it meaningful. So very insightful, and thank you so much both for these great insights. And if you all have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or email me after so we can include in like the post-panel email. But now I wanted to give Padma a chance to talk about the upcoming program for educators. So I will share my screen. Hope this is visible. Okay. So, oops. Yeah. Padma, would you like to talk a bit about this?
Yes. Is it completely visible? I think you should still need to zoom out. Zoom.
Yes.
Still.
Is that okay?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and representing Future World Alliance here. This is the first initiative I'm doing as part of Future World Alliance. It is a 4-week AI launchpad for educators. It's a 4-week virtual program designed to help educators, especially the middle and high school teachers, bring AI into their classrooms with confidence, creativity, and care. So it's the idea is to make teachers, educators it's to empower them to guide the next generation to use AI responsibly, not to turn them into technologies here. So it's a 4-week virtual program where we have different themes weekly, and then we give them weekly assignments, and there will be 60 minutes of live sessions for educators to go through and learn about what we are trying to teach. So there will be different tools that will be introduced every week. They can go through the tools. There will be, we are actually building this on Microsoft Teams community space, wherein that will be their workspace for them to come collaborate and then learn together. So it's a community building effort wherein we want all the educators to enroll into this program so that they can learn about this, how to use AI ethically and use that in their day-to-day curriculum building or classwork. So we have we have opened up the applications right now. You can use the QR code, or even there is a link in the pamphlet that is shared here. Maybe Ishita, if you could share this in the chat
Yes.
for them to access later, that would be helpful. So if you have any questions, do follow up. Give me, I'm available on the LinkedIn. Do connect with me to know more about this. But yeah, the program starts from November 1st till December 5th. And this will be a right way for educators to learn about how to use AI rather than make AI as part of their daily work rather than being very intimidated with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll definitely include this in the email as well, that we have after the panel. And I'm sure like a lot of professors who are joining us today, Dr. Warren, Miss Chanel, you would be interested in sharing more about this with your, groups and communities you're part of. And yeah, so I would like to end with one last question for you both. And this is something that, you might have been asked before, or something that you're being asked, you're thinking about often. So I guess, what is one action or one individual or institutional action that you believe will make the biggest difference in making sure the kind of future we're building is inclusive for all? And this could be, an action on your part, or even, talking to the broader audience of students, or whichever kind of demographic you'd like to focus on.
I think from my perspective, it's shifting the conversation away from what commonly is AI for efficiency, right? Like to make AI easier to write code, right, or to write a paper, or those sorts of things. I think to shift the conversation to say like AI for equity, right? Because like there are so many good things about AI with generation of captions, translations, personification of, documentation or content, right? That's personalized just for you. Um, assistive interfaces that provide more inclusive design, right? Like I think just shifting the conversation, because even when I was trying to use some of these AI technologies initially, I often found that accessibility was the easiest thing to start. And so I think just like moving that conversation to say AI isn't necessarily for efficiency. Like, yes, you might get some efficiency gains, but like where you can really make a great impact is leveraging these tools for, equity and accessibility. And I think it's just shifting that conversation, I think will really help open up all the possibilities that AI gives us.
Yeah, wonderful. And Padma?
Yeah, extending to what Mr. Glass has said, what gives me hope is that AI is no longer being shaped only in research labs or tech companies. It's being shaped in the classrooms, communities, and conversations like this, right? So around the world, I have seen educators, students, and everyday professionals exploring AI, not out of fear, but with curiosity and purpose. That's a profound shift because when AI becomes a tool of learning and creativity, it starts serving humanity instead of the other way around, right? So, if there is one action I would encourage is whether at an individual or institution level, it is invest in AI literacy because access starts with awareness. When we give educators, learners, and professionals the tools to understand and question AI, we are actually building a foundation for inclusion that will last generations. With so my hope is simple. It's like is that AI should become a privilege. It should not become a privilege, but a pathway that connects more people with opportunities, creativity, and belonging.
Wow, very well put. And I think that's kind of the goal of technology and what we're really looking to, kind of making our lives better, augmenting our lives, not just thinking of it as, a tool or something to chase like perfection or, efficiency. And I guess it's more so, I know Dr. Glass, you keep mentioning that you're a humanist by training. I think now the goal is making the technologist also turn into thinking more about the humanistic side of their impact of their work. And I like the framing that you both bring, the value of technology in this kind of purposeful, aim for kind of leading the trajectory of our future with this current growth. Um, so yeah, this is a perfect note to end on. And overall, it's again about accessibility, but accessibility has built-in sub-themes. So making those sub-themes like ethics more accessible within teams will lead to us eventually making accessibility more, you know, prevalent in this community. So really great insights. Thank you so much, you both, for both of your time and generosity, and thank you all for joining us today. Any ending notes from both of you?
Go explore AI and join the community learning.
Yeah, I think it's all about that learning, unlearning aspect that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I did read like one of the key skills for this century that will make us stand out is learning to learn. And I think that's what has been something that has spoken in this conversation too. So, yeah, looking forward to the great work you both are onto. And thank you for the impact that you're creating.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you
yeah,
for
we'll
having.
share the recording and key takeaways from the session in an email. But thank you all for joining, and please do share about the opportunity with Future World Alliance, the AI Launchpad, and hope to see you at the next panel.
Thank
Till
you.
then, take care. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Bye.